this session, in fact, is very much now a session also to hear from you what you think we should be doing. First of all, a few words why this symposium, and I think the last session especially has shown it. Through our biannual meetings and panel debates, we want to create that open and frank discussion. We want to listen to other opinions. We want to engage with others. We also invited several South African government representatives. We also mentioned we invited the African Union and hope that the next time they will join us. So it is very important that this is a forum to engage with the different players from civil society, from government institutions, regional, international organizations, international courts. That's one of the very important reasons why we are here. I would like now first to invite Richard Goldstone to give a few remarks. So what we intend to do, we want to wrap up a little bit and then invite you to give us your thoughts about what AGJA, the Africa Group for Justice and Accountability, should be doing. But first of all, please, Richard.
Well, thank you, Bettina. I would like, sitting in South Africa, and I would like to say just a few things about the position of South Africa and the International Criminal Court. It's clear from the mission of this group that we're not concerned only with the International Criminal Court. We're concerned generally with accountability and justice in Africa. And to the extent that the ICC fits into justice and accountability, and it obviously does, it's on our agenda. South Africa played a leading role in setting up the International Criminal Court. South Africa was one of the so-called like-minded nations that led the movement towards ratifying the Rome Statute in the late 1990s. South Africa led the SADC group, and I remember being involved with Richard Dicker of Human Rights Watch in organizing a number of crucially important seminars for SADC leaders in Johannesburg and Pretoria, and they were well attended by just about every member of the SADC group. And one of the results of those meetings was a very considerable support and ratifications that came from SADC members. And the civil society, NGOs in the SADC area in South Africa and in our neighboring states played a crucially important role in garnering public support and government support, coming particularly from government leaders such as Dana Omar and Carter Asmal and others in lending very strong support for the International Criminal Court, and that included strong support from President Mandela. What has changed since those days of South African leadership in the ICC? What has changed is that there are now 124 member states. What has changed is that some African states have actively used the ICC in their own interests in referring their own countries to the ICC. What has changed is that two heads of state have been brought before the court. One has appeared, President Kenyatta of Kenya, and President al-Bashir, who is charged with genocide and serious war crimes and crimes against humanity. What has changed is that the African Union has adopted an anti-ICC position, which was, I believe, with every justification referred to this morning by one of the speakers as an elitist position, completely ignoring the interest of hundreds of thousands of victims of war crimes who are suffering today on our continent, completely leaving them off the table. There's been an unfortunate movement in South Africa, including in particular within the governing party, threatening to withdraw South Africa's membership from the Rome Statute and the ICC, and proposing that there should be legislation to repeal the South African legislation enabling South Africa to comply with its obligations under the Rome Statute. The time has come, I believe, for the same civil society that supported South Africa joining the ICC to become much more active in ensuring that South Africa doesn't leave the ICC. For the same reason that we joined, we shouldn't be leaving, and I believe that our group one of the things we should be doing is drumming up support all over Africa, not only in South Africa, and particularly in civil society and victim organizations, supporting the role of Africa in the International Criminal Court.
Thank you. And I would like to invite Fatiha to add some of your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Bettina, and to Richard. I'd like maybe to say three things. The first one, let me build upon the issue of CSO involvement, or rather engagement, and to say that this came about quite strongly yesterday, and of course we've just heard, and I think probably we didn't give it sufficient attention. And I will not bore you with a lot of details. I will just say that CSO meaningful engagement is definitely the way forward. It's non-negotiable in the sense that CSOs can actually act as the conscience of those who make, implement, monitor, and evaluate the results of the laws. And therefore, in order for us to have an effective justice system and mechanisms, we should recognize the value and the importance of CSOs and support their involvement through capacity development, but through allowing a space for their engagement. The second thing I was reflecting on last night, which came about quite a bit, even today, is the concept of double standards. Let us never forget that some of the very ones who make the law try to break them in order for them to escape the law. So always remember the double standards. And when Navi spoke about the involvement of the US government, amongst others, we know this is happening. The third element, that I really would like us to underscore here, and Yasmin yesterday spoke about it quite vividly, is that we should celebrate the progress made, but in celebrating the progress made, never forget and sit back to understand that there is a shrinking space for human rights today, either because of the war against terror or because of many, many other reasons. So I'm saying to ourselves, we need to continue. We need to continue very, very strongly and in a resolved manner. And finally, absolutely finally, the past 3 days have been absolutely wonderful for somebody who's not a lawyer like me. I've learned a great deal. And I know I will go back, and if the time allows me in my huge schedule, is to read a few things. But I would like also to say that over the past 3 days, I've been reflecting that justice and accountability is a multifaceted, multidisciplinary sphere of focus. In other words, we should not just look at it from the law and the mechanisms that exist, but the environment that allows such laws and mechanisms to actually reach the results for which they were created. So we need to look at the multidisciplinary approach to that. And I hope every one of you will be able to give us some suggestions as to how to go about our responsibility. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fatiha. And now I would like to give the floor to Athaliah, who will give us a few ideas about our next plans.
Thank you very much, Bettina, and good morning, everybody. I think it's still morning, right? I have been given the simple, I believe, but enjoyable task of just sharing with you some of the ideas we had as a group when we met on Monday before the symposium started. And I just want to make a disclaimer up front to say that this does not mean that the door is closed to other activities we may be able to do, because that is exactly why we invited you here, so that we can also get your ideas and your suggestions on what are some of the more meaningful activities that we can engage in. As you will have all heard, the group was launched in The Hague at the Assembly of State Parties to the Rome Statute in November 2015. We believe it was a successful launch. We also realized that it raised quite a lot of expectations, because we had a full house, and we did talk about the fact that we did not want to be a group that only meets at conferences or at assemblies such as the ASP. In that vein, we then decided we would hold a strategic meeting, which we did on Monday here in Cape Town. And we agreed on a number of immediate actions in pursuit of our desire, as explained in our statement that was read by Judge Pillay at the beginning of our conference on Tuesday, that we would like to encourage support and foster an open debate on the relationship between the ICC, Africa, and beyond. We are not only focused on the relationship between the ICC and Africa. We want to deal with issues of justice and accountability everywhere, universally. But we are located in Africa and the ICC are our priority. So we would like immediately to engage in follow-up with the African Union. We would like to visit the AU. Some of our members will go to the AU rather soon after this meeting, and we will engage with the different institutions within the framework of the African Union, using some of the contacts, whether they're governmental or non-governmental, to engage in follow-up discussions with the African Union. We would like to see, secondly, an activity in West Africa where one of our members, the president of the CAR, Catherine Samba-Panza, who is about to hand over power. Is it today? Is it tomorrow? When was it? Tomorrow. As I've said that, women hand over power. They don't hang on to it. Like men. fewer men, unfortunately. I think are on record on this continent as having handed over power. In any event, that was meant as a joke, on a light note. But we would like to see ourselves carrying out an activity which we are still to discuss, in particular with our member, the president of the CAR at the moment. As we do this, we believe that it's very important, wherever we have an activity, to have some kind of a practical capacity building event or a lobbying event on international criminal law and the importance of justice and accountability. So we've also agreed that, for example, in the process of our AU engagement, we will hold some activity, whether it's in Arusha or in Addis itself, that speaks to issues of justice and accountability, and that builds capacity in different areas of international criminal law in Africa and the ICC in particular. Clearly, as you can see, the 12 of us are also located in different spaces where we believe we can use our presence, our positions, our knowledge, our links to influence and really begin to engage in issues of justice and accountability. And so wherever we will be, whether it's in Oxford, where Dapo is based, in Cape Town, where Judge Goldstone is, Navi, in her various engagements, myself in my position as a public servant in Botswana, a country that supports the ICC and would like to support it even better. My friend Fatiha here, who runs her own outfit and has a lot of knowledge on issues that have to do with peace building and conflict resolution. Femi, our civil society guru, and our Abdul over there, and the other members that are not here. We intend to use those activities, those networks, and those links to enhance issues of justice and accountability on the African continent and around the world. I think with those few words, I'll hand back to you, Bettina, so that we can then get your ideas in terms of what are some of the other things, or maybe some of the things we want to do, how can we do them better? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Athaliah. Perhaps let me just add a few remarks about our first event we had here. As you know, we started with a 2-day high-level meeting where we invited the directors of public prosecution, the directors for criminal investigation. From Nigeria, we had representatives from the justice sector. We had the chief prosecutor from the Palestinian Authority. We had a specialist who was telling us about experience in Central African Republic. Participants from Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Nigeria, as I said, Senegal, Palestinian authorities, and South Africa, where the office of the DPP of South Africa also was present. And then we also invited representatives from the ICC and from international organizations, and one of them was Interpol. And I think that meeting was a little bit also to show this is not just a club where we meet in nice areas and we discuss and have just discussions, but as Athaliah said, there's the other component, which is a very practical capacity building component. Capacity building is a wide expression. I would, in that respect here now, where we were heading was to discuss the establishment of domestic units for international and transnational crimes, or hybrid courts or other courts. And we had very interesting discussions on what could be the way to go to strengthen domestic systems to deal with international crimes. What can be the role of the international players in that, in promoting that. Not saying that we think the way is now only the national level, but I think we should look into areas of cooperation. We had a strong session on international cooperation. How can we cooperate with the international courts? How the expertise which has been gained over the years can go down to the national level and find levels of cooperation there, perhaps some new approaches, and train the people. There was a strong belief that what is really needed is a lot of very practical capacity building for investigators, prosecutors, judges, witness protection specialists, and these are some issues we talked about, and we will come up after that meeting with needs assessment. That's how we ended our meeting, so that we are able to have a document based on the experiences of all these countries I mentioned, and develop meaningful capacity building where, and now I'm looking at also our partners here from other organizations who do capacity building just like we want to do, where we should work together. You know, I think that's also why it was important that other organizations are here in this room, so that we don't do the same thing 3 times, but that we coordinate. And if we organize capacity building to strengthen the domestic institutions, we should work together. So these few remarks about our first capacity building of last week. And with these words, I would like to invite your questions and comments. Suggestions, and again, we are not, there are a lot of open questions for us too. You know, that's why we are very ready to listen to you, criticism or whatever you want to tell us. Yes, Mr. Tobiko?
Thank you, Bettina, and again once on my own behalf, on behalf of my office and my government, I thank Wayamo for the invitation for both segments of this program. We attended the one that was practical, which you have mentioned about, and attending also this that is rather erudite, highly intellectual, I think has also its own benefits. As practitioners, I think we have benefited understanding these highly technical jurisprudential arguments. I think a hybrid of both is important. I think a couple of issues, and the team, the group, I think, I believe, and I know is constituted or composed of the most eminent professionals and experts, and whose credibility and independence is beyond reproach. And I think it's absolutely important that this group maintains credibility, because for it to be able to work as a honest broker, it must be. I know, of course, you don't share views and among yourselves, but I think as a strategy, I think you need to distinguish what you say in open and what you yourself say behind closed doors. I was a bit horrified, and I don't want to attribute horrified when when I'm not going to say who, a member of the group, speaking in the capacity as a member of the group, not his own personal capacity, described the AU and the African initiative to pull out of ICC as a club of dictators out to protect themselves and their friends. Such messages, messaging coming out from has the potential to completely inflame, and I think it is important to message yourself, package yourself properly. And secondly, and I think as you work out, the question about positive complementarity, and I think you've mentioned, it's important that this group engages constructively with countries, state parties, and constructively and honestly, but must also appreciate and acknowledge legitimate issues and concerns being raised. That's the only way I think it's simple. This group should come out and firstly I ask, and questions will be asked very soon. How is this, without at all doubting the credibility of individual members, how is this group appointed? What is the eligibility criteria? And so what is the constitutive instrument? And such like issues would arise very soon, and the group needs to be prepared. Support the complementarity aspects, support national jurisdictions, and support regional mechanisms to capacitate them to be able to perform the primary responsibility. And lastly, and this is I think was said by the president of the court, that this group should see how it can be replicated in other regions, because as you say, you're not just focusing about Africa and ICC, you are talking about the principles of universality, the principles about accountability which apply across the region. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take some more comments and then we will answer. Yeah, Philip, Patrick.
Yeah, a very practical point that very much ties in what Mr. Tobiko just said. I think that what would be extremely conducive is a forum where the group as such would have sort of a voice towards the outside world. That can be, for instance, a web page or something like that, where the group issues statements. What I've seen very much in the area where I operate is whenever we engage with our stakeholders from the ICC side, it is often the problem that you have fora where a lot is said, but whatever is said and not written down is often and quickly forgotten. So I think that really what makes the big impact potentially of the group is that it has a forum where also op-eds can be posted, group statements on certain items where it would really have an impact if that were to be then really out there in a permanent and researchable fashion. And that ties in again with the capacity building exercises, everything that the group can do, and where the group can also maybe even provide some research support or whatever one want to call this for initiatives that need to be launched in a regional fashion. And this is pretty much a result from what some of us have seen on Friday and Saturday. I think that again, to have a common space where people can access and where people can research and where people can also see, for instance, how this group has been constituted, sort of really a forum to justify and to explain what this group does is, I think, a great help to really also to further enhance its own legitimacy. Thank you.
Patrick, you, and then we walk over and then we will answer first. Yeah.
So, of course, I'm a researcher, so I guess I have a vested interest in what I'm going to say now. This may be going a little bit too far. This might not be realistic within your limited mandate. But I think one of the problems that we have when we discuss the ICC in Africa is a lack of empirical research. A lot of what we hear about the ICC's impact in Africa is really anecdotal evidence. People just talking about their personal experiences. I come from Sudan, so let me tell you how things work in Sudan. Something like that. And I think we need more rigorous research into how the ICC is actually influencing domestic jurisdictions in Africa. And again, I don't know if it's possible for the Africa group to do something about this, but maybe support somehow initiatives, research initiatives that would somehow contribute to our understanding of what is actually going on in countries where the ICC is intervening, because there's no better way to deflect these criticisms that are being leveled at the ICC than to provide, I think, solid empirical research findings that really tell us what is going on the ground. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Once again, I echo words of thanks to Wayamo and all of you for inviting us here. My name is Nazanet Pillay from Amnesty International. And two practical suggestions, so it's already expressed from the panel, but just to reiterate it. The first one is, and this relates to how, I believe we should be prioritizing your engagement in the coming months. The first issue is that I'm sure you're thinking about it, but you'll need to seek audience before the African Commission, before the African Union itself, and some of the key member states who ought to remain strong champions of the ICC and accountability in Africa. I think your voice, your reputation, your image is incredibly helpful. And in this regard, I think two specific time-bound issues in my view. One is, as you may have heard, there is, in follow-up to the last Africa Union's resolution, there will be is an expected interaction between the UN Security Council and the Open-Ended Ministerial Committee on the resolutions passed by the AU. That will be, once again, potentially acrimonious conversation. What we don't want to see is, once again, UN Security Council members not even giving African members audience to be heard. That is destructive. That is negative. They should be respected. They should be heard. Their voices should be reflected there. That doesn't mean that opinion should shift. The principles we discussed should be upheld, but it is incumbent on the international community to ensure that they accord the right audience to them. So your help, your assistance in that is useful, and your help and assistance in making sense to the Open Ministerial Group going to New York to discuss this as well, about their individual responsibilities as member states as well. It's a club of progressive ICC supporting countries and highly critical nations as well. So there is a need to unpack who is who, and there is a need for honesty among the member states who represent the AU going to these forums. Senegal is part of it, and Ethiopia is part of it, and they sit in a different spectrum across that. So your access and reaching out to that, I think, will be incredibly useful, as we believe the upcoming June-July summit will potentially come to another debate around that. The second one, in which in a way relates to the point that Patrick raised, in my own view, I think you should leave the research and the academic debate to us. Great that Dapo is part of this, and I'm sure he will add much of that. But I think what is inherently needed is demystification of the myth that Africa is against the ICC, as we've seen it here even, including from our honorable colleague from Kenya. Many African countries continue to be supportive of the ICC. What they're not doing, and consciously not doing, is speaking out in support of it. That needs to happen. I think that's a way in which we can reverse the existing narrative around us. So once again, encouraging those member states who are champions of the ICC to have the guts, to have the strength to come out and say what their positions are publicly will be extremely helpful. And the public needs to know the reality. The public needs to know the facts as well. So those two, I think, are really incredibly useful issues. Thank you very much.
Otilia first, and then we are. Sorry?
Thank you very
Yes.
much, Bettina, as well as the African Group on Justice and Accountability. I'm making my intervention on behalf of the Institute for Security Studies, my colleagues that are here, as well as the Executive Director of the Institute. Our point of view, first and foremost, is that the group is very well constituted, representing the different regions on the African continent. Our call is for clear, constructive, as well as critical engagement on issues related to international criminal justice generally, and obviously having specific focus on specific issues. In this regard, one of the things is to avoid duplication of efforts, particularly when it comes to technical assistance and capacity building, perhaps as a group to look towards ways in which partnerships as well as collaborative engagement within the various regions can be formulated. Obviously, we would defer to you in terms of your advice, your knowledge of the regions, but also bearing in mind, echoing Netsanet's point, which is some of the expertise and knowledge that comes from the various organizations represented in this room. But in many ways, to reiterate, this is a great initiative, and we look forward to the engagement of the Africa Group, not only in forums for the Africa Group, but also in forums where the Africa Group can make a contribution, like at the African Union, as well as at the Assembly of States Parties to the Rome Statute.
Shall we first answer or take this group too? How do you feel? We continue and then we... All right, okay. It was Bill... Stephen, Bill. Okay.
Thank you. My recommendation to the Africa Group, and also to repeat my thanks to the group for bringing us here, is the following. I just want to start off from where Netsanet left off and just provide some update. First, at least Bill and I attended an ambassadors meeting in New York where members of the Security Council did express that they are open to providing a forum for the open-ended ministerial group to meet and engage with them. So they're not going to shut them off, and there will be no ignoring their voices. So I just want to clarify that. Two, the question of honesty, which Netsanet touched on, I just want to emphasize that. And I will speak about this in my personal capacity and not as a CIC, because I've not consulted Bill or Human Rights Watch, Amnesty, and other members of the CICC. But for me, what is very disturbing is that when it comes to honesty, I think the African Union oftentimes is not very honest in the way it engages. Let me point out what I'm talking about. The letter sent to the Security Council talks about deferrals and the Security Council not addressing two situations, Kenya and Darfur. The records speak contrary to that. There have been debates at the Security Council. The most recent 2013 was a very narrow margin between 8 states against granting a deferral in Kenya and 7 in support. So the recommendation to the AU is at least let them do their research and be honest when they're doing advocacy. Number 2, Charles Jallo yesterday mentioned an important point which, in my personal experience engaging with the AU, the ICC involved in signing memorandum and understanding up till 2010, 2012, when they suspended the idea of establishing the AU-ICC liaison office. This is an important office that would help address some of these issues. Now, I see a double standard there in the sense that the AU always is given an audience to speak at the Assembly of States Parties, but the AU continues to refuse the ICC to attend the AU summits. So we're talking of repairing relationships or listening to concerns of the AU. How about listening to the ICC and providing with a forum to express themselves? So I think this would be equally important if the ICC is given a forum to express themselves at these meetings. And then the last point is about meetings. Of course, Athaliah talked of activities of engaging the AU. I would encourage this group also to engage the Security Council. In the ICC, of course, I know you have good contacts, but it's important for you to engage with the AU ICC to understand the work that they do and the positions that they take. So these are my contributions.
Thank you. And I would also now really ask the students, if you want to have some propositions, please just feel free to give us your ideas too. Was it Bill?
Bill.
Yeah, Bill. Okay.
Well, thanks. A couple of points is that one, I think the group coming together is a really very good development. It's the kind of coming together of eminent personalities that I hope the Rome Statute system, the hopes for the continued development of the rule of law at the national level, at the regional level, will enjoy that type of support, not just on this continent, but elsewhere in the world. There are just a couple of areas where I think this eminent group could consider how they might make some contributions. Stephen has mentioned that a number of years ago, the coalition helped with the ASP president, foreign minister, to create an informal ministerial network. The whole goal of that was to try and have a direct link again with foreign ministers and attorney generals or justice ministers with the Rome Statute system, and that, I think, is a mechanism that this group could help encourage it to continue to work together, and for African ministers to continue to be part of that informal ministerial network. A second issue is the false, I think, and counterproductive separation of sectors in which both regional activities and international activities occur. So we see that there's a constant efforts to try and separate peace and justice. There has been for 70 years since the UN system established this separation between the development and economic efforts and peace and security efforts, and we very rarely have the capacity to be able to have international human rights and international justice, or regional human rights and regional justice works funded by the development resources or by the humanitarian funding resources. And so if bridges in that work could be broached by this group, talking to some of, again, ministerial level people both on this continent and elsewhere, I think that could be tremendous. I guess the last part for me is I hope we're nearing a tipping point where the international community is going to go beyond just paying lip service to the goals of prevention. And because the vast majority of what the international community is only willing to do is massive catastrophic crisis reaction. And the genuine prevention agenda has not had the kind of political support at the regional, sub-regional, and international levels, and I think maybe the panel would be able to help try to encourage both the regional organizations and the African Union and the UN system and the Assembly of State Parties of the Rome Statute that genuine prevention efforts now need to be made.
Thank you. Hannah?
Thank you. I wanted firstly to add my thanks on behalf of the University of Cape Town, both the Faculty of Law and the university more generally, to the Foundation. It's been a real honor and a privilege for UCT to host this first meeting. As we heard at the outset, both the Vice Chancellor of the university and the Dean of the Faculty of Law welcome the formation of the group completely, and we're very supportive of the future actions of the group. As I said, personally as well, it's been a real treat to be here and to hear the wonderful engagement. Secondly, on behalf of the students who so far have been too shy to speak up, but please do so, I know that they have really enjoyed the past couple of days of events. It's been very inspiring, and I know we have inspired a few new civil society activists and international legal academics to get involved in these ideas and activities in the future. So I would encourage you to continue to engage with students. They're obviously the future of this field, and particularly on the African continent, there are not as many opportunities to engage at such a high level on these crucial issues. So I would really encourage you to continue operating in fields that would enable the participation of students. And then to that end, I would also like to offer the support of UCT going forward. If there is capacity to engage further at an academic level, then UCT would be very happy to engage, and we hope this is the beginning of an ongoing relationship with the group. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, if there's no more right now, then I would like to invite our panel members to start addressing a few issues, and then we just take up the points. Shall we start with Abdul? If you want to comment on some of the points, no? Okay, Femi, you want to comment on a few points, and then we just...
Just one point, and that is with respect to the integrity of the ICC. I think one of the things we'll be taking home is the information from the Office of the Special Prosecutor that preliminary investigations are being conducted in other areas in the world, particularly Afghanistan, Colombia, Palestine, Ukraine, and Georgia. I think this is very important for us, at least to also challenge the allegation that this court is basically out to harass or embarrass leaders of African countries. I think it is also important to recognize the fact that while the debate is ongoing with respect to the relationship of the AU, or African countries, and the ICC, the fact that even in the continent, efforts are being made to also ensure that impunity is fought, So it won't be fair if we get the impression that African leaders are out to cover up, impunity. And I think that is very significant, having regard to the ongoing trial, almost concluded trial of the former president of Chad, Asne Abre, and the fact that there is also going to be a special criminal court in the Central African Republic.
Thank you. Fatiha?
Thank you, Bettina, and to everybody. I would support what Hannah said in encouraging students to really, please. I was concerned over the past 3 days that you're here, but it's important. You are the future generation, and we hope to be able to work with you or in support of you. So that I will always say it, right? I wanted just very briefly to come back to the group in response, or not in response, but in clarifying maybe 2 or 3 things. The group is an informal group, so it doesn't have a formal structure or funding or statutes or anything. We would like it to remain so in order not to be in a situation where we lose independence and as a result credibility. So that's very important. The second thing, as Bettina said, the group came together, or Athaliah said, we came together in November only, and 3 days ago was our second meeting, during which we were actually considering what the future is going to be and why we should exist, really. And in terms of that, Athaliah spoke a little bit about what we hope to do, and we're hoping to get more suggestions. But amongst the things is really creating the interface, and you're absolutely right, Philip. And our friend has already developed for our consideration a advocacy / communication strategy. That's going to be very important. The third element I wanted to bring, I always look at my sheet of paper and there are no notes, certainly not on that one. The third element is really the strategic vision that the group has, which is not only to address those issues in relation to ICC and Africa, but hopefully, if we are good at our work and we continue to maintain credibility and learn and create new solutions, is to serve as a model for other regions to go and also create other groups. So not to replicate ourselves, but hopefully by doing something good to inspire other regions to create similar groups, and it will precisely support the strategy of encouraging ICC to look at other regions like Georgia, etc. There will be. You know, in 3-4 years' time, there will be more cases for the Middle East. I can tell you that because I travel in the Middle East. And so the group would hope to create a knowledge base to actually encourage other groups to self-create in the other regions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for your questions, your comments, your suggestions, which, as you can hear, we are really going to reflect on. DPP, yes, the expression a dictator's club, it's actually used in our program in inverted commas. And I know I feel the need to clarify this because I think one of the panelists referred to this as if it offended them earlier. I don't think any of us referred to the AU in those terms, but the idea, as you'll have noticed throughout this conference, the symposium, was really to generate discussion, to provoke, use provocative language, which we have used in relation to the ICC itself by calling it a neo-colonial, anti-African institution and so on. I guess what we should have done is we should have also put that in inverted commas. But I can assure you, none of us sitting up here believe that the AU is a dictator's club. My head of state, who appointed me, is not a dictator. I would not call him that. None of his colleagues. That club certainly is the AU. It's a group of our heads of state who we respect. And I want it known on behalf of this group that we do not consider the AU a dictator's club. I hope that clarifies the situation. Otherwise, I may not be able to go back home. I'll be fired on the spot. May I also say that, yeah, I think you said something about, you explained the constitutive document and how the integrity and so on. I'm very comfortable with the current, we discussed this actually at length, DPP, on Monday, as a group, in terms of do we want to formalize, do we want to register? We don't intend to do that now. We don't think it's necessary. Many of us are actually involved in many different groups. What we did discuss, which we believe is very important, is the importance of making sure that, because we wear so many different hats, we make sure that we are quite clear when we do speak, the capacity in which we speak, and make sure, and I think many of us here, at the risk of sounding immodest, because we have been involved in these issues and other issues for many years, we are in sensitive positions, and I'm very confident, and we all assured each other that we would make sure that the integrity of this group remains at the very highest level, but that we will not compromise in terms of what we as a group believe in, where we are required to make statements on behalf of the group, which we will make, Philip, and I think we will be taking your proposals into account about how, the sort of modern ways of doing it, talking about the students. We want to be able to reach them, not use the old traditional ways that maybe some of us at our age are comfortable with. So that suggestion is welcome. I finally just want to address, Bettina, if you allow me, the comment from Otilia from ISS. Thank you very much for the encouraging words. And thank you again also for reminding us that duplication of activities is the last thing anybody needs, not only because the resources we have a shortage of resources, but also it would be a waste of energy to duplicate, and that is precisely why all of you were invited here, and we want you to continue to spread the word so that we know. I'm sure at some point there will be some kind of an audit, Bettina, of the different, and I know we use the term capacity building. A lot of people are doing capacity building, so we'll make sure, and we undertake, we discussed this on Monday, that we will be doing that from a position of strength rather than from a position of duplicating, comparative advantage, all that. I think we are all much too busy to be going and repeating or duplicating what everybody else is doing. But please tell us if you think we are. I think we'll be open to hearing that. But thank you very much for your comments and support and reminders. Thank you.
Well, I think the purpose of holding these discussions to me have been fulfilled because we've had some very, very good suggestions and directions from you. It's a big task. I readily agree we should be looking at prevention because that's part of justice. We prevent violations of human rights. That's the way to achieve justice. But I want to emphasize that we are an independent group. We volunteered our services. We want to focus on Africa because we are all from Africa. We care about our continent and we care about all the people on our continent who are suffering, will suffer if justice is denied to them. But before undertaking this responsibility, we wanted to have open discussions so we could hear all points of view, and we have. Most of us are very used to holding discussions in respectful dialogue. So it doesn't mean we're going to adopt one position and plug that. We're not. I personally was alarmed by the emotional level of dialogue or media reporting on the so-called withdrawal of South Africa and the AU. There were statements, for instance, why should we cooperate with the ICC when Bush hasn't been arrested? You see now, so down outside there in the streets, we don't say don't arrest this murder suspect until you've arrested all the possible murder suspects. And so very keen to get messages across so that people could address this in an informative way. And I totally agree, we want to be very careful about all our discussions being fact-based. And I'm very happy that media is here following our first discussions as well. So I also want to thank you for your many suggestions and recommendations. It's going to be very helpful as we move further with our responsibilities.
Thank you. Richard?
Well, there's nothing of substance I can add to the remarks that have been made by other members of the group. I would just like to add my thanks to Bettina and her colleagues in Wayamo, to the European governments that have funded and made this meeting possible, and to the University of Cape Town for so efficiently and hosted us and for the friendship, and to all of the participants. This really has been a very high standard. We've had a wonderful group of panelists, and we've had a wonderful group of participants with excellent questions coming from them. So thank you all.
Thank you. Dapo?
Okay. The final words.
Yeah, let me just comment perhaps on one of your ideas too, about the way we started. I think it was Mr. Tobiko's question. You know how every group starts, there's an idea, and one person starts to put people together, and then you start asking everybody, okay, who should be the next one, until the group grows. And I think now we consult if there will be new members, and I think, you know, when current developments tell us there should be new members, we will discuss that as a group. Thank you so much for the ideas. I think there were a lot of very good ideas which we will take up. Perhaps one about the outreach. As you probably know, our organization, we have a strong media component, and we have Kojo, we have Chris, and we have John Allen and Samu from Kenyan media who are helping us, in fact, really trying to do a strong outreach out of that event. The next time we will do live streaming. It was a little bit problematic because of the facilities, but we are working on that. We have posted already some stuff online. There have been tweets going around. Kenyan media has been reporting about it, South African media. So that's a very strong component of the work of the group, because we want to inform, we want to try to fight misperceptions and give truthful information. So we are starting and really taking that very serious. And then the other aspect of what you said about perhaps writing also article, and I think yes, giving advice and policy recommendations to different institutions, may it be the ICC, the African Union, other regional or international organizations, once we have reached that stage of being a trustful and credible institution, yes, that's really what we would like to do. And to give advice and policy recommendations, we will need all our knowledge and academic background, and there also we will need some other experts. We will work with other experts. For sure, that now depends on the funding, and a lot of your propositions, refer to that. We can do that. A lot of the stuff we have been thinking about, depending on our funding, and that's where I listened carefully to Bill, what you said, how you can start talking also to development funders to convince them the work we are doing is also coming from that area. And we also have the Nigerian media here.
Botswana media is not here.
Yeah. No, in fact, we have really international media. We have African media. We have a huge network, and Kojo and Chris take care of them. We informed them. We sent press releases. We got quite a bit of responses from them. And that's the idea. It's not only an event now in South Africa, but we want to reach all of Africa. So is there any more comment or question from the audience? Have we tried to answer? Yes, okay. Welcome.
Student. Yes, student. Okay, I'd like to add my voice to the thanks for this symposium. It's been really informing. And for me, especially, my research interest revolves around the working of ICC and impunity. So it's really been a good time for me. But my little admonition is beyond academic, beyond giving information and creating awareness, as much as that is good. During the coffee break, I and my colleagues were having a discussion, and we're saying this should go beyond just discourse. I mean, the group should see how they can get involved with policymakers and, where the decision is being made, could be act as a pressure group on these guys to ensure, on these people in authority, to ensure that the proper thing is done. Because the impunity, the violation is not being done in conference rooms. That's the truth. It's being done among policymakers. So I think we should see how we can also ensure that the efforts of the group reach those areas. Thank you.
It's a good point. It's a very good point. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that we have one of the policymakers in Africa here, the Honorable Attorney General of Botswana. We also have a city head of state who is handing over power tomorrow. And we have been told earlier, women hand over power in Africa. So we're in touch with the policymakers, and we're going to increase our relationship with policymakers so that we can have a progressive debate on this. Thank you.
Can I just say something?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that point.
It's very good.
It's very important. We agree, and coming from a young person, we are encouraged that that is one group of stakeholders that we should be talking to. I mean, going away from whether I'm a policymaker or not, certainly in my own small situation where I serve on the Botswana cabinet and I advise the government on all sorts of issues. But our interaction, for example, with the AU, we will be interacting hopefully with policymakers, and some of the other things that we're going to be doing, really we will be targeting people that sit at the coalface of decision making and policy making. And if there's any way that some of you here can assist us to reach some of the policymakers at the different levels. Remember, there's the national, there's the regional, there's the international, there's the personal level where. So I think your point is very well taken, and we will take it forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Fatiha? Yeah?
I'm not going to speak about policy making, but I think it's a very good idea. I just wanted, on behalf of the group, to extend our sincere thanks to the University of Cape Town. Of course, Hannah has been behind the scene pushing, and I think it's excellent, and we need to replicate that in other countries as well, in Africa, where we can interact with other stakeholders. The second level of thanks I would like to put forward on behalf of the group, even if my group has not, I have not consulted, is to thank the Wayamo team. I have to say. That from the youngest to the other level, I won't say the oldest, has been extremely professional, working hard, very focused, competent. And I have to say on my behalf, because I've been so busy, I was not able to respond, and yet they chased me positively to reach. So my thanks to on behalf of all of us. I said, on behalf of the Africa Group, is to say thank you to the Wayamo Foundation. And last but not least, I'd like to, as Fatiha Serour, to thank my group, our group, for the honesty and the integrity and the mutual support in our discussion. And that is very important because we want to be models to other people. Thank you, Bettina. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, just a few words from me, and then I hand over to Kojo. I also would like to thank my team, and I know that the last weeks have been rather stressful. I was probably not always the nicest person, so thank you for bearing with me. And thank you very much, University of Cape Town. This was a great experience, and I also hope that we will continue in that direction. And now also, I must say thank you to that group, because, we come together on a voluntary basis. This is not a paid job we are doing here. So thank you for taking the time, traveling for 2 days to come to these meetings. And I really think we had a very productive and interesting, constructive, open meeting. So I would also like to extend my thanks and now hand over to Kojo.